Everyone's complaining about the Trump and the tariffs. I think we should do the same.
Dude, I don't understand what's happening. Like my stress level has gone from like here to here.
Let's get into it.
Like I'm so stressed out about all this.
Nothing else?
Yeah.
Football's coming up.
Yeah. Go Chiefs.
Yeah, go Eagles. We're going to disagree. Chiefs already had too many wins, so it's time for those Eagles to get it.
Three-peat at least.
I don't care about that.
Oh, my God.
Give it to those Eagles. When is the last time they won?
This loudmouth doesn't know the Chiefs are going to win. He doesn't know.
I have the crystal ball. You guys forgot about that.
Right, he's going to find out.
Yeah.
His crystal ball has a crack in it.
Yeah.
You'll learn today.
Go Chiefs!
What about the Jets, guys, here in Winnipeg?
They're in first.
They are in first place.
What does that mean?
They're ahead of second. And it means other things. Michael Lee?
We were chasing the Capitals there for a while, and now we've caught up to them. I think we're actually 2 points ahead of them right now, as long as we keep winning. I think we won 6 games straight.
This game was a big deal.
It was a huge deal. What made me upset is that...
Which game is this? The Capitals game?
The Capitals game from Saturday.
With Ovi.
Right? Yeah, with Ovi. Yeah.
Alexander Ovechkin for you sports ball guys.
Yeah. What made me upset about this whole thing was that like not one sports media outlet really covered it like that. It was a big deal because we beat, like, we were tied with Washington, I think, for a while, or chasing them for a little while. And then we finally, had a one-on-one matchup with them. And then none of the sports media outlets really covered that.
No, and they've been covering Washington a lot because Ovi's chasing Gretzky's.
Yeah, that's really what it was about.
Gretzky's which record?
Which record?
Goal record, I believe.
It's all-time.
It is.
All-time goals, yeah.
Yes.
He's like, 18 away as of Saturday, I think it was.
Something like that.
Pretty nuts how close he is.
Yeah, it actually is pretty crazy.
It's been a long time coming. We said it was going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
A decade ago, they were saying Ovi's going to take it.
If anyone's going to do it.
It's going to be him. Like, he's nearly there.
So, that's pretty... this game should have been more hyped. And it's strange.
Yeah.
Strange that they, with the first playing second, with that Gretzky goal chase going on, and they're just kind of like, oh, another game with the Jets in it. Oh, well, whatever. Moving on.
I thought it'd be such a bigger deal, but they didn't make a big deal of it at all.
So we're going to make a big deal of it because we care about the Jets. Go
Heck
Jets.
yeah.
Go Jets.
It was a good game, too, right into the end, man. Scared us, and Josh Morrissey in overtime, hey?
Yeah, Josh Morrissey in overtime.
Beauty. Share a name with him for a reason. The Joshes are the best. They are the best people.
The hands again.
I mean, he's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm okay.
You're talking about this guy.
Michael Lee is stressed.
Anybody else?
It hasn't been a cakewalk.
Like, I don't even know what to think. I don't even watch the news. Like,
we got to watch the news so they can tell you what to think.
Yeah, right.
Or, at least try to provide you with something helpful to formulate an opinion with.
I mean, there's been quite a few big things happening recently.
Like what? Josh has been living under a rock.
Well, I mean, first
Don't pay
of all,
attention.
Are we talking about the Tariffs talking about?
Talk about it, Michael Lee. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, Trump threatened us with the tariffs.
Oh, yeah. He's been threatening it for a long time.
He was threatening for a long time. We wanted to see if actually going to follow through with it. And I think he said that the beginning of February was when we'd see, like February 1st, I guess, we'd see something happen.
Initially, it was going to be January 2nd, like the first thing he did. Or, sorry, January 20th.
Everything he was going to do on
January
day
20th,
one.
not second.
I think he was going to do everything on day one, but go ahead.
Yeah, and then, so now we come up to the weekend, and I think he announced it on Saturday, I think it was, that it was coming on Tuesday.
The White House press secretary, basically.
The White House said that it was coming on Tuesday for Canada, Mexico, and China.
It was when he finally signed the executive order that made it basically official.
Yeah.
That everyone's like, oh, this is real now.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had a bunch of people that were, at least to my knowledge, start to like almost panic buy.
Yeah.
They were going to stores. They were like, basically just like a COVID thing all over again.
Yeah.
Was there a run on toilet paper?
Oh boy, probably.
Eggs. I seen eggs go.
I think, eggs
yeah.
was a big one. And then once all that happened, all of a sudden, yesterday comes around, sorry. And there's this thing about him pausing in Mexico for 30 days. and then he met with Trudeau.
Yeah,
And
phone
now,
calls.
and now it's paused again for Canada, as long as we do what sorry, we have to increase the border security.
It's a little convoluted. That's what they've been discussing.
Yeah, and then
Give him the win, right? He's so the win he seems to want right now is the border, the migrants, and the fentanyl. It seems to be
that's
his
the big
focuses.
things. Yes.
So yeah, so I mean, just for some clarity, I'm sure most have heard by now, but what he was going to do was he was going to slap a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. Anything imported from either country into the U.S. would be tariffed at 25%, with the exception of Canadian energy. Now, a lot of these articles that we've read are saying oil. Apparently, it wasn't just oil. There was other natural resources that would only have been at 10% as well. So either way, 10% would be bad for all. And
Yes.
the initial issue that they'd be looking at would be increased prices in the U.S. for U.S. consumers and potential job losses in industries in Canada and Mexico.
Yeah, I'd like to unpack this a little bit because the way I see this story play out in media and in real life is it's like Michael Lee said. I don't know where to even start and believe. People are panicking and like buying like crazy and worried and talking about getting all the information wrong. It's quite crazy, and I don't like to tell people to not pay attention to the politics because it ultimately does affect your life, but don't get so involved to the day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis where you're just like worrying about everything when these backroom politicians aren't even communicating exactly what's happening because things are happening so fast. So everybody just settle down and let's just take it 1 minute at a time here in our own lives, because we can't do anything about it. All we can do is pay attention as best as we can and try to keep calm. So the way I see this here is, firstly, guys, there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings about what these tariffs are, and Adam has already gone on to explain how exactly these things work out. You know, tariffs mean that Americans are paying 25% on the goods from Canada. It's not good for the Canadian economy, who is like 76% of our exports go to the U.S., so obviously, if there's 25% charge on that, that's a big portion of our exports that's going to be charged. And okay, whatever, we're not seeing that directly. It's the Americans immediately that are seeing that tax, and they're looking at alternative methods to purchase or find supplies. Then what happens? Liberals turn around and say, hey, if they're doing taxes, we're doing taxes. Justin Trudeau threatens 25% on American goods. American goods coming into our country is, I forget what it is. I think it's like 18% or 20% of the exports that come out of the U.S. go into Canada. So it's not even a fair balance.
And who would pay that tariff?
Yeah, so that's all it is. It's the Liberals, again, making us pay additional taxes on American stuff. How's that going to affect the Americans? We can get into that. But the point I'm making here is, all it is using a method right now, a threatening method of threatening taxes. It hasn't happened yet. We don't know how economies are actually going to balance out once these come into place, if they do come into place fully. So, okay, let's not worry about it until it starts happening. We start seeing it happen, and then the market starts to take that into account, right? It's not a good thing. Economists have shown that, like, almost unanimously, that these things will affect Canada mostly, but
nobody wins, though.
There's no winning in this situation anyways. And let's just get into that point, Mike and Adam.
Before we do, I want to point out an omission. I didn't mention there's also a 10% tariff put on China. And that one did actually come into effect today.
That one actually came into effect?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'd like to know
And
that.
China has retaliated as well with its own targeted tariffs.
So they get a lower tariff than we do.
Yeah, they do. That's an interesting point that I think was raised. I can't remember who it was. I was watching. Was it Pierre? Was it Pierre Poilievre that raised it?
I don't remember, actually.
It was a politician, I'll go with that, mentioned that it seems nuts that China, one of the U.S.'s biggest rival, really, is being tariffed less than Canada and Mexico.
I want to get into the point first. Like, this is what you're saying here. They're tariffing us more than the other countries, right? But
yes, well, they're threatening to.
Part of the communication here on this issue of tariffs is why is it happening? Like the communication is not very specific. A long time ago, when that Donald Trump was still running to be the president again, he was talking about trade deficit. And that was the big issue that he brought up, why he would bring in tariffs. He loves tariffs. It's a tool that he uses. It's not great.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful word.
It's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. That's what he says at one point. But the reality here is, why is he doing it? That's the question. And even our own government can't figure it out. I mean, they can't figure out a lot of things. But on this front, they're not wrong as to why they can't figure it out. Because initially it was trade deficit. Trade deficit, you can look at that as both good and bad.
Is there a trade deficit, really? Like, there is.
There is.
It's not a huge one, though. I mean, he's throwing around this $200 billion number that's been like widely discredited.
But I'm like, let's look at the fact here first. Why is it happening? We don't really even know. I'm just telling you, originally when he started threatening the tariffs months and months ago, over a year ago or whatever, it was the trade deficit. He doesn't like deficits. Okay,
Right.
I understand that philosophy. When it showed up and the lady, the White House correspondent was talking about it, it was about what? Fentanyl and the border.
Migrants
All
at
of a
the
sudden,
border.
that's what the issue was, and that I understand that's the main issue.
That's like main and issue at once. It's a mishu.
I miss you.
Everybody
this
knows
podcast
this.
quicker.
It's the greatest, most beautiful word.
So the thing I'm saying here is, what is the real reason, and is this just a tool now to attack the problems that they have at the border? We've seen what's happened over the last little while, where all the people are coming in. We've seen how constantly a lot of Americans are dying of fentanyl, and it is coming across these borders. So to that extent, I can understand that being an issue, if that is the real issue that they are communicating, the politicians that is in America and the US, behind closed doors, that we're not seeing on the news.
It seems like it must be one of the real issues, because, he's taking it as a big win now that Canada and Mexico are stepping up to help the fight, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No, I can understand that.
What about his whole thing about Canada being the 51st state?
Well,
Does that have anything to do with all this? So isn't he saying about...
Do you think you're getting at, do you think that that's part of his reasoning for using these tariffs? Is that what you're asking?
I think it might be, because remember he was saying about economically or something like that if he may use economic force or something like that for Canada to become the 51st state.
You know what? I always tell you, he says a lot of BS, and
like 90% of what he says is probably...
Yeah, it's just him throwing stuff at that. But to the extent that is going to be a reality, I don't know. Could the Americans actually exert enough economic force on Canada to make us so poor that we cannot sustain ourselves as an independent nation? Yeah, probably they can. Just like I said, 76% of our imports go to the US. We're basically like, tell us what to do, US, because you hold all the cards. Unfortunately, that's the way Canada's been run for the last little while, and they simply could do that.
Whether they have to be willing to take a lot of pain themselves to do that to us, though.
Yeah, and this to the point. To the point though, is that his intent that Mike's asking, right? I couldn't honestly tell you. He might like the notion of expanding America or whatever. I don't know.
He did say they're going to manifest their destiny into space or to Mars or whatever.
Yeah, I really couldn't tell you. The guy's got a big ego, so maybe he wants something else there. But the reality of that is, let's hope not. Canadians are working towards remaining independent. We just have to see how our leadership and our economics develop in this country, because it needs to go somewhere, or else we are going to be continuing to suffer. The thing about these tariffs, we don't really know the reasoning, but we're saying that maybe it's the border. Maybe with this 30-day reprieve we're getting, maybe that is the issue that was at hand that he wanted to resolve. I don't know.
That's one of his
question
big promises, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the question I want to ask you guys is, how now did this whole talk of tariffs, how did it transpire in two ways in the public eye? There's, first of all, the U.S. perception, right? How the media and the population in the U.S. is seeing it, versus how us here in Canada and the media in Canada is explaining this situation. So you guys, tell me, what have you guys seen, let's say, first off in Canada here?
Well, in Canada, the media is they're making a strong case for how much this will hurt American consumers, American companies, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it will if it happens. But I mean, we know it's going to hurt us more. Maybe it'll take a month or two longer. But you know, job losses, inflation, all that kind of stuff. That would be a serious problem for us. You know, our contraction of our GDP would be significantly more than the US's would. All in all, like there's literally no way for us to win against an economy 10 times the size of ours. So they can do what they want to do, and you know, we have to do our best to weather it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why there was a strong push within Canada to amplify the damage that would be felt on the American side of the border.
And what have you seen, guys? Like, tell me about it, Mike.
Well, I know here in Manitoba they pulled all the American alcohol off the shelves.
BC too?
Or sorry, I shouldn't say they did that.
They were going to do that.
They were going to do that, and then they stopped. They basically said never, like they're going to put on pause, just the same way that they paused the tariffs right now.
BC, Ontario, Nova Scotia. Was Quebec thinking about it? It would have been pretty significant.
Yeah, it would have been pretty.
So stop buying American and buy Canadian. That's what we've been hearing. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, there is a list I've seen out there of all these Canadian products, like the Canadian equivalents, of the American brands. Apparently, even in some stores now, they're even posting up "Made in Canada" besides some of the products now.
It's you know, I understand the sentiment. Life is never that simple.
Let me just, before you get onto your point, I would just like to say that I've always been a proponent of the buy Canadian over anything else. It's just good to support our neighbors and stuff. But go on to your point about how it's not so simple, Adam.
It's not so simple to just pick up things and look at it, you know, read where it says it's made. If it says made in Canada, buy it. If it's made in US, don't. You know, it doesn't work that way. It is quite possible that a product could be made in Canada, but it was made out of, you know, other products or raw materials that were sourced from the US, or vice versa. It's not just possible, it's common for this kind of thing.
Did you see that this hour has 22 minutes sketch about the ketchups?
Well, what led to that?
Yeah.
Was it our prime minister running his mouth again without knowing what he's talking about?
Explain it to the people that don't understand.
So, as I understand it, you know, in response to all of this, Trudeau was making one of his speeches, and he reverted to, I guess, a tactic from the last time we had this fun tariff situation in Trump's first term. Back then, I guess, when we were talking about buy Canadian, there was this idea of buy French's ketchup because it's made in Canada, and Heinz ketchup was not made in Canada. So that was said back then. And I guess without looking into it, he got up there and he just said this again. And then he was promptly shut down by Heinz, who informed him that their ketchup is made in Canada from tomatoes sourced from Canada. So it made him look like a bit of an idiot, which he's probably getting used to at this point. But yes, I imagine that led to a skit from 22 minutes. I didn't see it though. So.
Yeah. I saw that skit. I don't know if it's an old one or not, but it was just basically a guy in a grocery store saying, buy French's because it's not Heinz and it's Canadian. But that goes to your point exactly. It is not simple to simply always buy Canadian. It's so intermingled with the economics of how things are made or sourced, right? Some stuff is sourced from Canada but manufactured somewhere else, and then parts of it are everywhere, and then put together in a different place, and it's like, is it really Canadian? Like 75% of the effort was Canadian, so maybe it's a Canadian product, but it's also some US effort. It's not as easy as people like to say, just support Canada. Like, if you can, definitely do it, but at the end of the day, like, first of all, great, I like to see the patriotism, but how much is that actually changing our culture for the better? How are Canadians perceiving this current threat versus the previous threats we've had from our own country, where we can't get business developed even to have our own manufacturers and stuff. I mean, like, are Canadians going to look at this and say, well, just because the big bad American president did this, now we have to support Canadians? Why weren't we saying this a long time ago, where we were supporting our own businesses and looking at that and providing our own jobs in this country? I'm asking you guys, from the perception of what we've seen now from our American threat here, are Canadians actually going to make a change, or are we going to have the same situation after the dust settles with this Donald Trump tariff situation, and Canadians are just not going to continue learning a lesson from this effort?
I can't tell you what's going to happen.
Get that crystal ball out. I'll show you how it works.
The cracked one? But I mean, I would hope, if hope even matters, that this is going to be a turning point for Canada, where people will start paying attention to these issues that we've been ignoring for so long. And like the fact that, all of our exports, well, most of our exports go to one country, and we've just set ourselves up to be bullied by them. I would hope that this is going to resonate with people. And, they will start electing politicians that will make some change to the history of bad choices that have been made that led us to today.
Let me ask you the other question.
No.
The other question.
No more questions.
The other question I have is, on the American side, have you guys seen their media and how they perceive this scenario? Because you know what I've seen? First of all, like you said, we're like a little tiny country compared to the bigger country, right? Sounds like something that the Kamala said about another two countries. But the point here I'm making is, what I've seen of the Americans' perception on this is, they're like, okay, I understand he said this. We didn't know how serious he was going to be. We don't know what it's going to do. We don't know if it's going to increase their cost of living and all of that. The one thing I saw about this trade war is there was this talk that he would actually stop or abolish the income tax so that they had less taxes in the U.S., even though they would end up taxing them more in the sense of the tariffs. Like, do you think Americans were overall worried? Because I don't think I saw that.
Well, I mean, I did see some interviews with I guess the typical American person, just on, when they go out and talk to people on the street, asking them about it. And I was surprised. I don't know if I was surprised, but a resounding number of Americans understood that when the U.S. puts a tariff on Canada, Canadian companies and Canadians pay that tariff. As I think I've discussed that previously, there was a lot of people in the U.S. that thought that's how it worked. They didn't think they'd be affected by this at all. And it seemed to be a little more recent as we got, to within a week of when tariffs were coming, that I think their media started reporting on more how this actually would play out, and how tariffs work and who pays them. So I think that maybe they were not concerned about this because they just figured they wouldn't be affected by it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I say about that is, unfortunately, we don't have a huge portion of their economy. So how much is our 40 million people or whatever going to affect them? But to your point about how the U.S. sees it, yeah, they're a little misinformed. I don't think they really even care as much as Canadians do, because it's going to affect Canadians significantly more.
Yeah, like they can complain about higher prices, but in Canada and Mexico, people are going to be losing their jobs and their livelihoods, and which is a bigger problem for people, right? I mean, we always complain that everything costs too much. Part of the talks here was like they're trying to bring more jobs back, and this could possibly be a way to do it if it's too expensive or not reasonable enough for them to have the jobs there. I think we have to pursue that now anyways. That's what I'm saying. It's like even if tariffs don't come, this needs to be like, Canada, open your eyes. We can't continue allowing ourselves to just have one trading partner who beats us up. It's time for us to act more as a unified country and allow our natural resources to be used to enrich us. We need to sell them more to Europe and Asia. We need to find ways to make this happen instead of constantly shooting ourselves in the foot so we can be, bullied with 51st state comments and tariffs and all this kind of nonsense.
To that point, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my perception of the leadership in this country and the next, the leadership in the U.S., not so great for Canada, but they're a different country. They're worried about themselves.
That's how countries work. Yeah.
Here in Canada, I don't trust these liberals, and especially Trudeau or this carbon tax Carney to actually, do anything like. And
why don't you trust them?
That's besides the point. Let me just say,
I think it is the point.
The thing I'm getting at.
I don't trust them. Why? Go away.
I've said that before, but the thing I'm getting at here is there's partisanship in all politics. I've consumed media on this from both sides, extreme comments on either side saying Justin Trudeau or the Mexicans handed it to Trump, big loss, whatever. And then you see the more right side politicians that are favoring Trump and they're saying, oh, Trump wins this, blah, blah, blah.
Canada bends their knee.
That's
what the press secretary said.
The reality is somewhere in the middle. It's not what the left says or the right says. Okay, it's somewhere in the middle. It's a negotiation. It's compromise. Hopefully, maybe more towards the American side because they have all the muscle. The thing I'm getting at here is the leadership. Canadians have Justin Trudeau, who has harmed our economy for 10 plus years. Look into the graphs on Canada's economy. It's kind of sad. The amount of businesses that can't actually start in Canada because of bureaucratic red tape is ridiculous. And like you're saying right now, Adam, wake up, Canada. We need to do something. I'm not going to trust a decade of liberals who have done harm to Canada to all of a sudden say, we'll help Canadians and make this a better situation. No, you're not. No, you're not. You haven't done it. Actions prove louder than words. I'm just going to say to you guys, it's time for a change. I think most people realize that. Depending on what the polling is saying, are we going to swing conservative? Probably. How much? I don't know. The Conservatives, we're going to find out what they're going to say, right? And what they're actually going to do. The thing is, we have Pierre Poilievre probably going to be the next prime minister. At this time, he is not the leader of the federal government. He is just a MP.
The media likes to jump on him and demand to know why he doesn't have an answer for everything Trump says.
And it's ridiculous because Trudeau is the man right now. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that is how it is. If you don't like Trump in the U.S., too bad, that's your guy. I'm just saying we do have another leader in this country, on a sense that the U.S. has senators. We have senators and governors. Governors run the states. We have premiers. Mm-hmm. All these premiers have been threatening back to Trump, like waving their big dicks around and saying, I'm in charge here. I'm Doug Ford and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to tax
all of them?
No, you're right, Adam.
Some of them weren't.
A lovely lady from Alberta, Berta Proud, Danielle, she has actually talked to Trump. Probably part of the reason why oil was only taxed, threatened to be tariffed at 10%.
Guaranteed.
And what has she had to say about this recently, Adam? I think you were reading about this. Why don't you tell us what her opinion is on the matter? Is she waving a big stick and threatening the U.S.?
No, she's been pretty solid in her message of being a proponent of diplomacy and working with the U.S. to find the common goals and the common grounds, because the fact is, with all this tariff nonsense and the insults being thrown around and everyone trying to prove they're the tough guy or whatever, the fact is we get down to it and realize that in North America we have common goals. U.S., Canada, Mexico. We don't want drugs to kill our people. We're pretty much united in that. And I think that's sort of why we have this pause in these tariffs.
Yeah, I wanna expand on that point that you're making, actually, Adam, because you and I were listening to her speak, Danielle Smith speak recently, and what was the media asking about the fentanyl situation and that? They're like, well, the media was basically saying we're not as bad as Mexico down in the south. Our numbers are far less. You know what?
And why do you think Mexico got the pause first? Do you think it's because Canada promptly threw Mexico under the bus and said they're worse than us? Do you think that really helped us out? I think that was a terrible play for us. You know, if
in what way?
If there's more fentanyl coming from Mexico into the U.S. or there's less, you know, coming from Canada, it doesn't matter. The point is that there's drugs coming into all three of our countries. They're circulating around, and people are dying and lives are being ruined. And that was the point that Danielle Smith was making. And when she was being interviewed, they just kept telling, you know, she was being asked why she would not acknowledge that it was worse, you know, coming over the Mexican border. And sure, maybe it is, but that isn't the point. We need to get rid of it everywhere. And I think that's more what she was focused on. And you know, if we are to believe that this is one of Trump's major platforms, I think that it's not unreasonable for him to say, I don't care where there's more of it. I just want it all gone.
Yeah, I would like to say on that front, this is why I say don't worry about what the media is saying or doing, because they are always finding the most trumped up thing to say and work you into a frenzy. Like, just don't listen to them right away. Let things go by for a few hours. It was probably a better life before the 90s and CNN and hourly news, when you just sat down and heard a clear story at the end of the day rather than up to the minute basis. Because, you know what, I had a conversation recently with a lady at work who was telling me how my life's going to be so expensive now because of the Trump tariffs. And I was like, do I sit here and explain this whole situation or whatnot? I basically said, well, they're stating that they're going to do it, but it hasn't yet been affected. But I heard a thing from Reuters stating Reuters that there would be a 30-day pause. And she's like, well, that's not what they're saying on the White House press secretary. And I said, I get it. One moment you have her saying something, and then the next you just get a news organization saying basically like, well, we're hearing this. And you know what? There has been a reprieve now for 30 days. So did some insider information from the politicians go to that specific organization and make them more factual than what has actually to what has actually occurred? I don't know. The point I'm making here is what you said. You get these newscasters that are obviously biased, and they start working up these emotional questions to get people worked up because you're going to get the views. Well, listen, I understand what it's like to want to get the views. I have a YouTube channel where I feel like that. But I'm not going to work everybody up into a panic. I'm trying to be more reasonable and just say, you know what, maybe I lean more right. Maybe I lean more left on this situation here. But let's have that common ground. Where's the Team Canada approach? And that's what we're getting from our lovely Danielle Smith, who's actually being a leader, saying, let's get diplomacy in here. Let's talk with that big bad orange man in the U.S. and come to some kind of resolution, you know?
I think he's got a bit of a budding crush there. He keeps saying she's lovely.
She's beautiful. She's the most beautiful premier we have.
That might be true. I can't picture them all right now.
Michael, you jump in and give us your beautiful opinion, because you know what? We've gone on.
What do you want him to provide an opinion on? Just anything in particular?
Just tell me how, Michael Lee. I know you're a lovely guy who feels the senses of other people emotionally more than me. Tell me how you have felt from this whole situation and how us as Canadians should probably work towards something more positive.
Personally, it's felt like an emotional roller coaster for the last 2 or 3 days. Right? You have the fear of the tariffs coming, and then if you're like me, I work in the automotive sector, so I'm trying to figure out exactly how does that affect, you know, my place of work. What's going to happen at that point, right? During the COVID days, we didn't really have any vehicles at all, so I'm like, are we going to go back to that? Are we going back to lower inventory? Like, what's going to happen? Right? And then you look at the news, you read what everybody says, everybody's opinions. you see the panic buying, you see the people just literally freaking out about all this. And someone like me who didn't quite understand exactly what this was, there's a little bit of anxiety inducing trying to figure out exactly what it meant for Canada. And then, kind of psyching myself up to get ready for all this, and then boom, a pause again. And it's like, okay, now I guess we have some time to figure all this out. But now in about a month's time, we're going to have another emotional roller coaster.
We're 30 days from the next one.
Exactly.
Is that not what the media, a lot of them are just trying to achieve? Since they're
Pretty much.
It's like journalism these days is like dead. It's kind of sad that very little effort is made. Like I think we discuss a lot on how pathetic the questions are that are asked to some of these politicians. But
or one-sided, yeah.
Yeah, but I think Mike portrays this very well. Is like instead of trying to make sure they're passing good information. Like I want to be the first with a big headline to get people riled up so that they'll pay more attention. And I think unfortunately that works really well. So a lot of journalism has just become that.
And it's not good. It's not healthy. That's what I'm saying. Stay away from the news programs unless you are very mature and you consume enough of it from all sides of the spectrum that you can actually make an informed decision. But ain't nobody got time for that.
It's a good point though. Try to see multiple perspectives.
I like podcasts on that front.
Podcasts. Nah, those are for losers.
That's us, baby.
Yeah.
We got a podcast and we talk about it from different perspectives, and there's a lot of good podcasts out there. You give a lot of time to a topic specifically if you don't know much about it, and you bring on opposing opinions and let them argue it out. Podcasts are probably the way to go on all these topics, because the media is not doing it. They have a lovely platform on cable that a lot of people are still watching, but it's so one-sided and it's just not. It's fear-inducing, anxiety-inducing, and I don't like it. Michael Lee doesn't like it, and we don't need it. We don't need to worry about all the small details that are happening behind the scene, and we don't even know because the politicians are making the decisions up as they go. They're working on it, okay, and hopefully it comes to some kind of compromise and some kind of decision. All I'm saying is, just don't worry about it right now. We don't actually know, and we're probably worrying about something that might never happen. They say that about all things when you get anxious. Just don't worry about it because we don't actually know.
Yeah, but saying don't worry about it does not work for everybody.
It literally is like makes people worry.
Yeah, it makes them worry more even. Because if you're like me or like some people that I might know as well, you don't want to get too lax and too... it's fine, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, bam.
Some of us want to be ready for everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I understand the concept. I mean, there's only so much. This is why you got the conservative-minded people who fall under religious perspectives. They turn things to a higher power, and they have a healthier mental state overall because of that effort that they just give up. They
Very interesting opinion of yours.
It's based on fact that a lot of the conservative-minded people are religious.
Have a healthier mental state and are conservative. That's what we've learned today.
Statistically, yes, that is accurate.
That's probably true. I don't know.
Yeah, there's statistics on that, but the point I'm making here is a lot of those people give it away to a higher power, and that anxiety just goes away. Whether you want to say that's naive or whatever, all I'm saying is prepare yourself as best as you can. Don't consume the media that is often just simply wrong or fear-mongering.
But a lot of people will tell you that they're consuming that media and reading about it in order to prepare themselves.
Exactly. And how do you know which ones are wrong?
Well, you don't.
You only know when time flies by.
You try to. That's why you try to understand the media outlets you're consuming and try to know their bias, right?
Fair.
I mean, I read a lot of the mainstream media in Canada, and most of ours is left-wing biased. So it's harder to find, the more perhaps right-wing biased media, so that you can figure out what the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Mm-hmm. So you just have to understand a little bit about the media outlet you're consuming data from, and while you're consuming an article or a video or something, like look for bias. It's usually not hard to find if you take a step back and take your own opinion out of something and just listen to the words being said or that are written, you can usually see the bias. You can see them leading, they ask leading questions to try and get a predetermined answer, that kind of stuff. So just be cautious for that kind of thing. That's just literally part of protecting yourself in this world,
I agree. I want to just go back to the point that we talked about these tariffs that everyone has worried about for a little while. And I just want to ask you guys, at this point in the situation, do we have a lot of reason to worry that you guys can see, or do we actually believe that productivity is happening on this discussion and these tariffs may not be implemented as threatened?
I think we don't need to worry for the next 30 days. But when we get closer to that point, my prediction is we're going to have a bunch more conflicting nonsense thrown at us that we're not doing, or we should be doing, or 51st state this, and and again, we'll find ourselves in the situation, as you mentioned earlier in this podcast, it was not clear what was desired from us leading up to this, and I'm sure that will be the same as we lead up to the next 30-day deadline, and perhaps that's by design. So people keep their cards close to their chest until the last minute. You see that in negotiations all the time. It's a common tactic. So should we worry? Do we need to worry? I don't know. It's a natural human reaction to worry about it. There is always a possibility that something that affects us negatively could happen. I think it's more likely that it won't, but maybe there's a little bit of hope in there too. So I hope that cooler heads will prevail, and we realize that we have a lot of common goals. As I said before, like for example, Mike mentioned the auto industry earlier. It's been stressful for him because he works in that industry. I don't know if there is a better example of a North American economy than the auto industry spread across Canada, US, and Mexico.
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect example of how you have a very integrated, industry that works really well across all three countries. And, to have something like this come along and potentially blow it up, grind it to a halt, jack up prices, who knows? But I mean, that is concerning that someone is even threatening to do that, for sure. So if your question is, should we worry about it? Maybe a little bit, but people don't always control that for themselves as much as they might want to.
Yeah, I understand that part. I'm just saying, from the nature that we've seen with this guy, with Trudeau and with Trump, we see Trump being brash, arrogant, not really caring about previous things and doing his own thing. I get that. That's not easy to deal with.
No,
at the same time,
that's the challenge. We
have a leader in this country that doesn't really know how to negotiate and doesn't develop anything for Canadians, really. So yeah,
that's the worst combination we could be looking at.
Unfortunately, yes.
So that is concerning.
So I understand that the worry based off of that. The fact here in Canada, hopefully we get an election sooner and maybe we can work towards some common ground with new leadership. Unfortunately, we don't know if that's happening quite yet.
Well, now we're being told that having an election in Canada would be a bad idea now because we can't destabilize the situation more.
Yeah, they say that. I understand that concept, but I just want to get to the point where I see a lot of fear and anxiety in this situation. And like you guys are saying, we have a 30-day reprieve. It might be a negative opinion, Adam, that you have based off of reasonable assumptions that we've seen, that people will hold their cards to their chest and we will find out that they want something else at the end when it
sure
gets to the card.
Else.
Yeah, like I just said,
what is,
we don't know what he wants.
Maybe if he just told us, we'll be like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Like,
all I'm saying on this front
situation.
is the border. This is exactly what I'm saying. The border situation is a thing that Canada and Mexico and the U.S. all should agree, stop letting those drugs harm people. One of the things is they're actually going to call those cartels terrorists, which I think is a fantastic idea. Those are deadly criminals that are producing economies of drugs and violence. I don't like that. So
I honestly had assumed already that we were treating them like that, so I find it good news that we're going to do that now.
And that's one commonality. A second that we might have if we get a more right-leaning leadership here in Canada.
Disaster. End of the country.
Can't
have it.
We need to develop one of our major resources, and I know people don't like it, but the right-leaning Republicans and the right-leaning conservatives, maybe, especially in Alberta, they will get together and say, let's develop these oil pipelines, because that is something that Daniel Smith is proposing. Get Canadians across the country to start using our steel and our resources and people from all over Canada to create jobs and develop this sector. And then, you know what? We can negotiate that, because we don't have anything left, any reason or a reasonable way to take that crude resource and refine it. So who's going to do that? Our lovely friends in the U.S. down south,
and then sell it back to us.
The Gulf of America. So the thing is,
the Gulf of America.
They could come up with an agreement to actually use this commonality of resources development in Canada and the U.S. and develop something and get away from this tariff nonsense. I'm sure they would love to develop something that's economically more feasible. Like, they want to provide more jobs. Get more Canadians building these pipelines. Get Americans building pipelines in the U.S. And then, you know what? We'll be less dependent on the oil from those other oil-rich Middle Eastern and Russian oil. That's just, as they say, dirty oil. It's oil that feeds wars and bombs over there. At least just feed the American machine that's more usually online with our values.
Yeah, and oil, and liquid natural gas are two great examples of resources that we have in abundance here, and we should probably, start figuring out how we can use them to make us not so reliant on the U.S., which we've discussed. Pipelines need to be built for that. We need terminals built on the coast so it can be put on ships. These are all good ideas, but it's not even just pipelines and oil. That now uranium is becoming a thing again, and Canada has like the third largest repositories of it in the world. And it's being looked at again to produce energy. So this is another example of something that we have and we can use to make our situation better. But unfortunately, we have a government right now that just makes these kind of projects practically impossible to be profitable. So we don't get to reap the benefits and rewards of this, and we don't get to help clean up the climate in other major polluters by getting them off of coal, which I can't stress enough that coal is so bad for the environment, much worse than natural gas, or if we could find ways to use more nuclear power, which is fairly clean. If we can just burn less coal in major polluters like China and India, it will go much further to cleaning up the environment, to cleaning up the air, than taxing and pummeling ourselves in Canada to death to try and prevent any sort of resource extraction and make everything electric and all this kind of nonsense that's being done here. We're not going to build roads, all this kind of crap that I'm just sick of hearing. We need to think of the climate on a more global scale and figure out how can we help the whole world improve the climate, because it's not like we can just clean up the air above Canada only and we'll be saved. Like this is a ridiculous way to think.
On those points, Adam, thank you.
I got a little sidetracked.
That's fine. I don't disagree with you, and I like hearing your opinion. The thing I'm getting at here, overall, with this tariff situation that we've mainly discussed, there's a lot of reasons to think positively that we could work together in Canada and the U.S. We've just brought up some of them. Let's have hope that the leadership whether who it is, Justin Trudeau, the Conservatives, the big bad orange guy, hopefully, I think, especially with the big bad orange Donald Trump, I think that he wants, at the end of the day, to point back to metrics that are easy to intangible, saying we increased jobs, gas prices were low. These are all things that Canadians could say, hey, we can turn around and help you with this and make it look like it's a big win for him.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of thing he looks at. If you've watched him for the previous 4 years, and then when he was running, he was always pointing back to these metrics. So if we can feed his ego and feed feed Americans and Canadians together with these things, and we have the proper leadership, then I think there's hope. I just want to leave it on that, because go and watch anything on the news, you'll be upset, and you'll probably go and have a Crown Royal after the night's done. But I'm saying, just let's look at the positive. Send messages to your MPs if you have to, saying I want you guys to be positive on this front and work on it. Just stop with the tit for tat tariffs and nonsense, and let's look at the positive, because there is a positive that can happen. I know it could be bad too. It could be either, but that's all I want to say on that front with this situation that we've had today. It was a great discussion, guys.
Yeah, it was.
Yes, I agree.
We should be a team. We have common goals. Let's work together and move beyond this.
Yes. I thank you guys for this talk today, because honestly, a lot of these tariffs now for me make a lot more sense. And all of this now kind of puts more things in perspective for me. So I really enjoyed today's discussion. Hope you guys did as well.